The story so far. In 1980, just 4 years after being founded in a California garage, Apple was the biggest maker of PCs in the world. Computer giant IBM was not amused and fought back, launching its own PC in 1981. Though built from copycat technology, IBM's PC was an enormous hit and spawned many imitators, the PC clones. But PCs were still a pain to use. A revolution was needed to make them friendlier. Now, view on.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the launch of Windows 95.
Yes, welcome Microsofties. Nice to have you all here. But now let's welcome the chairman of Microsoft. Listen to this. This is a man so successful, his chauffeur is Ross Perot, ladies and gentlemen. Please welcome Bill Gates.
It's August 24th, 1995, in a suburb of Seattle in the Pacific Northwest. This is the biggest, noisiest product launch in the history of the personal computer. It's Windows 95 software, and Bill Gates is the star, chairman, chief nerd, and spiritual leader of Microsoft.
But the truth is,
this is the latest step in Bill's dream to have his software running on every PC in the world.
we wanted people to be able to appreciate how Windows 95 makes computing faster, easier, and more fun. And for 7 years, it was a lonely, lonely crusade.
Reality police.
This moves the whole PC industry up to a whole new level.
Wait a minute. All this publicity is so Bill Gates can claim that Windows 95 is the latest and perhaps most significant improvement in the PC since it was invented. He can say that his new operating system makes PCs nicer to look at and easier to use than ever before. They'll no longer be just for geeks and nerds. They'll be so easy to use that even my mother will want one. But you know what? Most of the ideas in Windows 95 were invented 20 years ago. The 20-year journey to this software celebration hasn't been easy. It has involved huge gambles, passionate commitment, dramatic setbacks, and required the occasional crushing of rivals and allies. It's the triumph of Bill Gates' commercial vision. Success in the marketplace doesn't have to come from innovation or from being the best, if you have a ruthless ability to exploit your opportunities. And the way Microsoft made the PC's graphical user interface its own is a textbook example of that ability. Time for another cringely crash course in elementary computing. In the early days of personal computing, the machines were pretty hard to use. In part, that's because they were primitive, but it's also because computer guys tend to like things that are pretty hard to use. This is an IBM PC circa about 1983, and on it, I've written a letter to my bank manager asking him to back one of my get-rich-quick schemes. I need to file the letter now, and let me show you how I do it. There will be a test on this. Okay, the commands are copy C:\\/ quickrich.doc space A:\\/ begging and return. Well, not very easy to do. Here's a Windows PC about 12 years newer, and we'll do exactly the same thing. I've written a document, quickrich.doc, and I put it in the begging file, and yes, I really do mean to do it, and that's it. Pictures rather than words, making the PC easy and intuitive. This is called a graphical user interface, GUI or GUI. Where they come up with these names. The battle to bring GUIs to PCs and make them more user-friendly took 10 years and is a hell of a story. That's what this program is about. It's also about how Bill Gates ended up master of the GUI universe and a gazillionaire. I never said it was a fairy story. It all began in 1971 in Palo Alto, just south of San Francisco, when Xerox, the copier company, set up the Palo Alto Research Center, or PARC. Xerox management had a sinking feeling that if people started reading computer screens instead of paper, Xerox was in trouble. Unless they could dominate the paperless office of the future.
You could take computer technology into the office and make the office a much better place to work, more productive, more enjoyable, a lot more enjoyable, more interesting, more rewarding. And so we set to work on it.
Bob Taylor ran PARC's computer science lab, and one of the first things he did was to buy beanbags for his researchers to sit on and brainstorm.
These are a couple of the original beanbag chairs. The role of the beanbag chair in computer science is ease of use.
Okay. It was said that of the top 100 computer researchers in the world, 58 worked at PARC. Strange, as the staff never exceeded 50.
See, you didn't get your butt low enough.
But Taylor gave these nerd geniuses unlimited resources and protected them from commercial pressures. It's very comfortable.
Now let's see you get out of it.
I feel my neural capacity already increasing.
There you go.
Oh, God.
The atmosphere at PARC was electric. There was total intellectual freedom. There was no conventional wisdom. Almost every idea was up for challenge and got challenged regularly.
The management said, go create the new world. We don't understand it. Here are people who have a lot of ideas and tremendous talent, young, energetic.
People came there specifically to work on 5-year programs that were their dreams.
This is a computer room in the basement of the Xerox Palo Alto Research Center. About 25 years ago, they built the MAX time-sharing system in here, and now it's loaded with all sorts of other computers. And there's one that we're really interested in here. Let's see. Here it is. Let me turn on the lights. Okay, here we have it. This is a Xerox Alto computer built around 1973. Some people would argue that this is the first personal computer. It really isn't, because for one thing, it wasn't ever for sale, and the parts alone cost about $10,000. But it has all the elements of quite a modern personal computer, and without it, we wouldn't have the Macintosh, we wouldn't have Windows, we wouldn't have most of the things we value in computing today. And ironically, none of those things has a Xerox name on it.
What's the mail this morning?
This promotional film, made in the mid-70s to flaunt Xerox PARC research, shows just how revolutionary the Alto was. It was friendly and intuitive.
This is an experimental office system. It's in use now.
It had the first GUI using a mouse to point to information on the screen. It was linked to other PCs by a system called Ethernet, the first computer network. And what you saw on the screen was precisely what you got on your laser printer. It was way ahead of its time.
Thank you, Fred.
Everybody wanted to make a real difference. We really thought we were changing the world, and that at the end of this project, or the set of projects, personal computing would burst on the scene exactly the way we had envisioned it and take everybody by total surprise.
But the brilliant researchers at PARC could never persuade Xerox management that their vision was accurate. Head office in New York ignored the revolutionary technologies they owned 3,000 miles away. They just didn't get it.
And none of the main body of the company was prepared to accept the answers. So there was a tremendous mismatch between the management and what the researchers were doing, in that these guys had never fantasized about what the future of the office was going to be, and when it was presented to them, they had no mechanisms for turning those ideas into real-life products. And that was really the frustrating part of it, because you were talking to people who didn't understand the vision. And yet the vision was getting created every day within the Palo Alto Research Center, and there was no one to receive that vision.
But a few miles down the road from Palo Alto was a man ready to share the vision.
The most dangerous man in Silicon Valley sits in an office in this building. People love him and hate him, often at the same time. For 10 years, by sheer force of will, he made the personal computer industry follow his direction. With this guy, we're not talking about someone driven by the profit motive and a desire for an opulent retirement at the age of 40. No, we're talking holy war. We're talking rivers of blood and fields of dead martyrs to the cause of greater computing. We're talking about a guy who sees the personal computer as his tool for changing the world. We're talking about Steve Jobs.
Hi, I'm Steve Jobs.
When I wasn't sure what the word charisma meant, I met Steve Jobs, and then I knew.
Steve Jobs is on my eternal heroes list. There's nothing he can ever do to get off it.
He wanted you to be great. And he wanted you to create something that was great. And he was going to make you do that.
He's also obnoxious. And this comes from his high standards. He has extremely high standards, and he has no patience with people who don't either share those standards or perform to them.
And I'm also one of these people that I don't really care about being right, you know. I just care about success.
Steve Jobs had co-founded Apple Computer in 1976. The first popular personal computer, the Apple II, was a hit and made Steve Jobs one of the biggest names in a brand new industry. At the height of Apple's early success, in December 1979, Jobs, then all of 24, had a privileged invitation to visit Xerox PARC.
And they showed me really three things. But I was so blinded by the first one that I didn't even really see the other two. One of the things they showed me was object-oriented programming. They showed me that, but I didn't even see that. The other one they showed me was really a networked computer system. They had over 100 Alto computers, all networked, using email, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't even see that. I was so blinded by the first thing they showed me, which was the graphical user interface. I thought it was the best thing I'd ever seen in my life. Now, remember, it was very flawed. What we saw was incomplete. They'd done a bunch of things wrong, but we didn't know that at the time. It's still, though, they had the germ of the idea was there, and they'd done it very well. And within, 10 minutes, it was obvious to me that all computers would work like this someday.
It was a turning point. Jobs decided this was the way forward for Apple.
He came back and, I almost said asked, but the truth is demanded that his entire programming team get a demo of the Smalltalk system. And the then head of the Science Center asked me to give the demo because Steve specifically asked for me to give the demo. And I said, no way. I had a big argument with the Xerox executives telling them that they were about to give away the kitchen sink. And I said I would only do it if I were ordered to do it, because then, of course, would be their responsibility. And that's what they did.
The mouse is a pointing device that moves a cursor around the display screen.
Adele and her colleagues showed the Apple programmers an Alto machine running a graphical user interface.
A selected window displays above other windows, much like placing a piece of paper on top of a stack on a desk.
The visitors from Apple saw a computer that was designed to be easy to use, a machine that anybody could operate and find friendly, even the French.
Choose one.
I think mostly what we got in that hour and a half was inspiration. And basically just sort of a bolstering of our convictions that a more graphical way to do things would make this business computer more accessible.
After an hour looking at demos, they understood our technology and what it meant more than any Xerox executive understood it after years of showing it to them.
Basically, they were copier heads that just had no clue about a computer or what it could do. And so they just grabbed defeat from the greatest victory in the computer industry. Xerox could have owned the entire computer industry today. Could have been, a company 10 times its size. Could have been IBM. Could have been the IBM of the 90s. Could have been the Microsoft of the 90s.
For Steve Jobs, the road to Damascus passed through Palo Alto. He persuaded the Apple board to invest in technology copying what he'd seen at Xerox PARC, his instrument of change. They hired 100 engineers and started developing a new PC codenamed Lisa. But there were problems. The Lisa didn't work properly, and its price tag was heading toward $10,000, way too much for the average PC buyer. Jobs' domineering style drove everyone nuts, too, so the board ousted him from his own pet project.
You know, I brooded for a few months. But it was not very long after that that it really occurred to me that if we didn't do something here, the Apple II was running out of gas. And we needed to do something with this technology fast, or else Apple might cease to exist as the company that it was.
Jobs got his answer from Jeff Raskin, Apple employee number 31. Raskin's idea was a $600 computer, as easy to use as a toaster, codenamed Macintosh, after America's favorite Apple. Jobs liked the price, but not Raskin's design ideas. So Steve took over the Macintosh project, determined to make it a cheaper Lisa.
And so I formed a small team to do the Macintosh, and you know, we were on a mission from God, you know, to save Apple.
While Jobs pursued his Mac mission, he needed a more orthodox chief executive to run the company, a respectable face who could sell to corporate America. He chose Pepsi-Cola executive John Sculley. Sculley refused. Leave Pepsi for a 4-year-old company that had been set up in a garage? Are you serious? But it was hard saying no to Steve Jobs.
And then he looked up at me and just stared at me with this stare that only Steve Jobs has. And he said, "Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life? Or do you want to come with me and change the world?" And I just gulped, because I knew I would wonder for the rest of my life, you know, what I would have missed.
Yeah? Well, or usually...
For the young Mac team, average age 21, this was the start of the toughest but most exhilarating assignment of their lives, relentlessly driven by Jobs' ego.
Oh, look at this. And who's this fresh-faced young guy here?
That's me 11 years ago. Had more hair, I guess. A little thinner. Oh, I love these people. They're like family to me, really. And we were united by this common bond of trying to do this incredible thing with the Mac.
Jobs wanted the Mac to revolutionize the PC market, so he insisted that the team deliver perfection.
Steve was upset that the Mac took too long to boot up when you first turned it on. So he tried motivating Larry Kenyon by telling him, well, you know how many millions of people are going to buy this machine? There's going to be millions of people. And let's imagine that you can make it boot 5 seconds faster. Well, that's 5 seconds times a million every day. That's 50 lifetimes. If you can shave 5 seconds off that, you're saving 50 lives. And so, you know, it was a nice way of thinking about it. And we did get it to go faster. And then this is one of the very first Macintosh wire wraps. This is wire wrap board number 4.
As the Mac progressed, new features were being continually added. Jobs said the Mac had to be insanely great and pushed his engineers to the limit. He had to, because by early 1983, Apple was in trouble. And this is what was giving Apple such a headache. IBM's first PC launched in August 1981. It was a runaway success. Within a couple of years, more than 2 million units had been shipped, overtaking Apple and making Big Blue the biggest player in the market.
When IBM personal computer owners look for good software, where can they turn? To IBM.
What was driving IBM PC sales was software.
Business programs, entertainment, productivity, education.
But software for an IBM wouldn't run on the Mac. If the Macintosh was to succeed, Jobs needed killer applications. Enter 25-year-old software supremo, Bill Gates. At that time, his company, Microsoft, had 100 workers and was growing like crazy thanks to DOS, the operating system that drove the IBM PC. But DOS sure wasn't a GUI. Gates and his aggressive number 2, Steve Ballmer, were immediately intrigued by the Mac.
Jobs talked to Bill at some industry conference and said, hey, we're doing, I think Lisa was sort of in development. He said, but I'm going to do the graphical interface machine here at Apple. Not just that Lisa thing, Bill. I'm going to do the one that's really going to be the winner.
While the Mac was being developed, Jobs staged an event, a parody of a TV game show, to whip up enthusiasm among software developers.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, the Macintosh software dating game.
Jobs got the 3 top software bosses of the time to sing the Mac's praises. One of them was Bill Gates. Steve didn't realize he was opening the door to the man who'd proved to be Apple's main rival.
When was your first date with Macintosh?
We've been working with the Mac for almost 2 years now, and we put some of our really good people on it, and
even before we finished our work on the IBM PC, Steve Jobs came and talked about what he wanted to do, that he thought he could do sort of a Lisa but cheaper. We said, boy, we'd love to help out. The Lisa had all its own applications, but of course they required a lot of memory, and we thought we could do better. And so Steve signed a deal with us to actually provide bundled applications for the first Mac. And so we were big believers in the Mac and what Steve was doing there.
Most people don't remember, but until the Mac, Microsoft was not in the applications business. It was dominated by Lotus. And Microsoft took a big gamble to write for the Mac.
And so we got started in early 1982 on our Macintosh software effort. And I think at that point in time, it really clicked with Bill that, graphic user interface was going to be the way of the future.
But while Bill was having his own GUI revelation, Jobs believed that Apple's true enemy was IBM.
Will Big Blue dominate the entire computer industry? The entire information age? Was George Orwell right about 1984?
Despite Steve Jobs' showmanship, the IBM PC was hurting Apple's business.
And most pundits considered that Apple was going to be out of business. In a few short months, Business Week ran an article on their cover saying, it's over, IBM has won.
The Mac team saw themselves as Apple's pirates, but the gang was now being called on to save the ship, as the Apple II was losing precious market share.
In the case of the Macintosh team, they were behind schedule in getting the Mac out, which is not unusual in high technology. And so just getting that product to market was extremely important.
After many delays, a date for the launch of the Mac was announced. The pressure of the deadline was mounting, but Steve was still a perfectionist.
No design issue was too small, and it was never too late to do it right.
Oh, it was a pressure cooker. We were working until we finished. We couldn't go to sleep or anything. I was up for 3 days before in that very last push. And finally, just the stars aligned, and the last release we made at 6 a.m. that morning.
It was now all or nothing because Lisa had turned out an expensive flop. The fate of the whole company seemed to rest on the launch of the Mac. John Sculley had even authorized a $15 million advertising campaign to coincide with the Mac's public unveiling, January 24th, 1984.
I remember how nervous Steve was before the introduction of the Macintosh. And the rehearsal the night before was a total disaster. Nothing seemed to go right. Steve was upset at everybody. We wondered how in the world we were ever going to get through the introduction the following day. But when that moment came, Steve was a master showman.
There have only been 2 milestone products in our industry: the Apple II in 1977 and the IBM PC in 1981. Today, 1 year after Lisa, we are introducing the 3rd industry milestone product, Macintosh. Many of us have been working on Macintosh for over 2 years now, and it has turned out insanely great. You've just seen some pictures of Macintosh. Now I'd like to show you Macintosh in person.
The Macintosh was undoubtedly the first affordable personal computer with a genuine graphical user interface. It was also the first computer to be a monument to one man's ego. Forget the brilliant work done at Xerox PARC and the innovations borrowed from the Lisa. On the day, only one man was claiming paternity for the Mac.
So it is with considerable pride that I introduce a man who's been like a father to me, Steve Jobs.
I was standing off stage, and as he came off, he said, "This is, the proudest, happiest moment of my life." And it was all over his face. It clearly was, because he had launched a revolution.
Ultimately, it comes down to taste. It comes down to trying to expose yourself to the best things that humans have done, and then try to bring those things in to what you're doing. I mean, Picasso had a saying, he said, good artists copy, great artists steal. And we have, always been shameless about stealing great ideas. And I think part of what made the Macintosh great was that the people working on it were musicians and poets and artists and zoologists and historians who also happen to be the best computer scientists in the world.
With delusions of grandeur running rampant, Apple created a Hollywood-style TV commercial. It symbolized how the friendly Mac would free us from the Orwellian tyranny of clunky IBM PCs. Please.
One will, one resolve, one cause.
Despite the hype, by late 1984, the Mac's sales were disastrous.
We shall prevail.
This is a highly sophisticated office computer.
In ad after ad, Apple desperately pointed out that the Mac was far easier to use than the IBM PC, but it sold for $2,500, $1,000 more than the IBM. And despite Jobs' best efforts in recruiting software makers like Bill Gates, applications were scarce.
It didn't do very much. We had Mac Paint and Mac Write were our only applications. And the market started to figure this out. By the end of the year, people said, well, maybe the IBM PC isn't as easy to use or is not as attractive as the Macintosh, but it actually does something which we want to be able to do, spreadsheets, word processing, and database. And so we started to see the sales of the Mac tail off towards the end of 1984, and that became a problem the following year.
The Mac really ought to have won the battle for the desktop. Okay, it was more expensive than an IBM PC, but if what you wanted was a friendly, easy-to-use system, and surely everyone wanted that, then this was the only game in town. At least that's what the boys at Apple thought. But they weren't reckoning on one man, Bill Gates. Gates saw that the Mac's GUI represented a long-term threat to Microsoft's money machine, to DOS, the clunky operating system that sat inside every IBM PC. So Bill had his boys create a GUI that sat on top of DOS, rather like building a fancy facade on an old building. They called it Windows, and it wasn't much at first, but it was good enough to defend the DOS franchise. At Microsoft, it was a long and often frustrating struggle to find a GUI solution that challenged the Mac. I know the feeling. For years, teams of Microsofties slaved in their windowless offices to build Windows, refreshed by an endless supply of free sodas.
And I was the development manager for Windows 1.0, and we kept slogging, and yeah, it took us, I don't know, about 7 versions, but it took us a few versions to get things right before 1990, that's right.
Windows may at first have been a joke compared to the Mac, but Gates is persistent. Slowly, it got better, and the guys at Apple got worried. As each new feature appeared on the Windows GUI, the more they thought Microsoft was copying the features on the Mac. So finally, they sued Microsoft, accusing them in a long legal battle of stealing the look and feel of Apple's GUI.
The look and feel, which is how it looks, the experience of using it was not patentable, but it was copyrightable. But there was no precedent law. This was going to be a precedent-setting case.
But it was a period of 5 years where, you know, Microsoft, our whole strategy would have been ruined because Windows was very important to us.
They weren't going to change anything. And they were going to get us to cave in or take us all the way to the Supreme Court on this thing.
We assumed that the lawyers, the judges would all come to the right conclusion, which eventually they did.
And Apple lost. But in that period of about 6 years that this case was going on, it may have lulled us into a bit of complacency, thinking that we were going to be insulated, you know, from the Windows attack.
The only problem with Microsoft is they just have no taste. They have absolutely no taste, and what that means is, I don't mean that in a small way, I mean that in a big way, in the sense that they don't think of original ideas, and they don't bring much culture into their product. And you say, well, why is that important? Well, you know, proportionally spaced fonts come from typesetting and beautiful books. That's where one gets the idea. If it weren't for the Mac, they would never have that in their products. And so I guess I am saddened, not by Microsoft's success. I have no problem with their success. They've earned their success, for the most part. I have a problem with the fact that they just make really third-rate products.
On August 24th, 1995, Gates delivered the coup de grace to his software rivals. Windows 95 combines the PC's operating system and its graphical interface into one package. With a worldwide promotional campaign costing $300 million, it looks set to become the industry standard, supplanting Microsoft's old warhorse, DOS.
Thanks to all of you for an incredible job.
Cue the triumph of Bill. A software nerd is the richest man in the world. But even as Bill Gates bestrides the PC world like a colossus, ahead lie bigger battles. Battles that will make the trouncing of the Mac and mastering the IBM PC look like a tea party. The Gates fortune was built on setting the industry standard for PC operating systems. Fine as long as PCs are standalone boxes on your desk. But now they are being linked into a worldwide network, the much-hyped information superhighway. The PC on the internet is a mailbox, a telephone, and a television.
Of course, at the center of this will be the idea of digital convergence. That is, taking all the information, books, art, movies, and being able to provide them on demand on what the PC will evolve into.
The internet is the next wave of the information revolution where there is as yet no industry standard, a world where even Bill Gates seems unsure.
You know, if you take the way the internet is changing month by month, if somebody can predict what's going to happen 3 months from now, 9 months from now, even today, my hat's off to them. I think we've got a phenomena here that is moving so rapidly that nobody knows exactly where it will go.